everybody, GW here. I want to talk about another caliber. I spoke to you in a previous video about doing some shorts on calibers, and across the board you guys like the idea of that and you wanted to see more of it. So that's something that I'm going to be doing. I haven't started it yet, but maybe I'll kick it off here with this one, and maybe I don't start this one with a short, but maybe I'll do shorts on other ones, and based on how they're received, we can decide if we want to do more in-depth reloading, talking more about it than you can get in 60 seconds in a short. But this one here is a long-time favorite, and it's just one that it was my first rifle that I had built and started to build myself, custom rifle, and it's the 35 Whelen. I built mine on a 1909 Argentine Mauser action, which is an 1898 Mauser variant, the 98 Mauser variant. It's the one that is preferred for custom rifles, basically because it's the newest, so it's the best steel. Pretty much universally, anything post World War II is considered better than pre World War II. So the 1909 Argentine, although the date predates even World War I, it was produced during and after World War II largely. So it's better modern steel. Also, it's got a hinged floor plate from the factory, and that's a big deal on a custom rifle. The 98s had a military style where you had to use the bullet tip to push it in and then slide back a little bit, and the magazine floor plate would come out, but it was separate. You could lose it. It would fall off the rifle. The hinged floor plate with a little bitty tongue or a lever in the trigger guard that could be depressed forward was preferred because it retained with the gun, opened up, dumped the cartridges out, dumped the cartridges in. You could load it that way too, and then close it. You just had to be careful of the orientation feeding. But that's the rifle that I chose. You saw a lot of these built on Springfields and Mausers for a number of reasons, but the biggest one was the ease and cheapness of the attaining of these rifles after World War II, and people wanting or needing to rebore. Either in the case of the Mauser, it was an 8mm and they couldn't get ammo for it, so they would make it into a 30-06 or something bigger. This one was big enough that it allowed the rebore of the existing barrel to create the caliber, where the 30-06 was already a smaller bore than the 8mm, although it was a longer case. So the chamber might had cleaned out. Well, no, it wouldn't, because I don't know, it might have cleaned out, but that's not what we're talking about here. The bore is too big, so you'd have to go with something like an 8mm 06, which would be a 323 diameter bullet with an 06 case, which was another Wildcat that was moderately popular because of that. But the Whelen was one that it came out of a company called Griffin and Howe in the early 20s, working with a gentleman named Colonel Townsend Whelen, who did not create this cartridge, but it was rather named after him by the people at Griffin and Howe. The guy's name was, I think it was James Howe, I think was the gentleman primarily behind the design of this. And basically all it is a 30-06 case that's been opened up to 35 caliber. The shoulder stays the same angle. It just gets reduced because the bore gets bigger, the neck, the throat gets bigger. Let's zoom in here on this case drawing in this Nosler manual right over here. And you can see we've got the same 2494 case length of the 30-06, the same 3340 overall length of the 30-06, 17 by 30 shoulder, the 473 base, all the same. The differences are up here. 388 outside dimensioned and a 358 bore. So what it did was, as always when you expand a case, you get better velocities for the same weight bullets. So if you compare the numbers on the lowest end with the Whelen, in this manual it's 200, in most manuals it's 180. But in this manual, we're seeing attainable velocities past 2,900 feet per second with a 200 grain bullet. Now that's pretty remarkable when you think about, I didn't bookmark 3006, but we can probably find it here pretty quick just to get a number. Let me look here really quick because it'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, there's 3006, 110, 200. Okay, 3006 with a 200 in the same manual, the highest velocity attainable is under 2,700, so it's 2,688 is what they got with this, with their load, their barrel length, their rifle or their action, whatever they were shooting this in. It looks like a 24-inch barrel. It doesn't say rifle, but it could have been universal receiver, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a 24-inch barrel, 2,688 with a 200 grain bullet. Over here in the Whelen, we've got a 200 grain bullet out of a 20, this is a 26-inch barrel, so it is a longer barrel. That's a wicked long barrel. 2925. Put that in perspective. Well, hold on. Let's talk about a little bit heavier bullet, because the Whelen is better with a little heavier bullets. Today they top out at 250, but back in the day, back before it was legitimized, back before World War II, and in through World War II, into the late, maybe 80s, into the late 80s, mid-late 80s, you could get 300 grain bullets out of Barnes. Actually, they had two of them. They had a full metal jacket and a soft point. And that 300 grain bullet could be pushed to near 2,400, 23 and change feet per second. That's a powerhouse when you think the 3006 didn't quite get there with a 220. So in this manual, 225 top loading is coming in just over 2,800 feet per second. A whole bunch here in the high 25s. They drop down into the mid 26s. But they crest 2,800 feet per second with a 225. And over here in the 250, they are besting, they are doing 2650, just about 2650. That's a lot of velocity for a big 250 grain bullet. And let's put that in perspective. So let's go back here really quick to the 338, because most people know that one. 338 is available in 180s and 200s and 225s. 225 being probably the sweet spot for the heavy bullet. Yeah, it'll go heavier, but it's probably the sweet spot for velocity, the 225. But, well, let's not talk about 180 because we didn't do 180 in the Whelen, but we did 200. So 200 and 210 grain in the 338 Winchester Magnum. 2870, 2860, 2905, 2915, 2840, 2880. It just bests 3,000 with one powder. That's with a 200. The Whelen did 2925 with the top load. So that's 100 feet per second behind the top load. And this is a Magnum. Jump up to the 225, and it gets a little more in favor of the Whelen. 2640, 2670, 27, 2780, 2807, 2817, 2830, 2880. Top load, 2880. Back to the Whelen, 225. Top load, 2806. So under 100. Under 100 feet per second behind with a larger diameter bullet. Yeah, long range ballistically, the 338's better. It's got better SD numbers, so it's going to be a better long range bullet. But this bullet is 358. That bullet is 338. So it's got a bigger bullet of the same weight. So it's starting out at a bigger hole. I'm a proponent of bigger holes. Bigger holes leak more, or have the ability to leak more. That's my thinking. I'm a hunter, and that's where I come from. Let's step this down and look really quick at some of the other 300s to show just what, 2,900 plus feet per second with a 200 grain bullet means. Here's the Remington short action Ultra Mag. This is that little short action Remington 300 Magnum with a 200 grain bullet. Top load, 2860. 2860. Or over 29 in the Whelen. Step up to the Winchester Short Magnum. 300 Winchester Short Magnum. A lot of people know this one. 200 grain bullet. Top load, 2940. So about 30, a little less than 30 feet per second. Faster than the Whelen with the same weight bullet. This is a 30 caliber bullet. That's a 358 diameter bullet with virtually identical velocities. Step up to the big 300 Winchester Magnum that everybody knows. Top velocity, 2980, just say 2990. So you're 70 feet per second, 75, 78 feet per second faster. Not a lot. That's a 300 Magnum compared to the 35 Whelen. It's not a lot. And the velocity is, it's even more. I was thinking it was 17, it's 25. So it's even a little less than that. That's just really, really, really impressive. From a standard case head working with probably 60, low 60,000 PSI. That's darn impressive. Now this caliber was invented in the early 20s, and it was favored by bear hunters, people who needed big bullets, stuff like that. It got a resurgence in popularity, as I said, after World War II with all the GIs coming back and rechambering rifles. But it took over 60 years for the cartridge to become legitimate. And by legitimate, I mean for a major manufacturer to submit the drawings to SAMI, get a SAMI approval on the cartridge, and produce it and make rifles and ammunition in that caliber. And that was Remington in 1988. I started to build my Whelen in 85 or 86. I took delivery of it just before Remington released the Model 88. I'm sorry, the Model 700 in 35 Whelen in the Classic. And I could have bought that rifle for about $580 or $575 at the time. And I had nearly 3 times that invested in my build. Yeah, I was a little upset. I had the Whelen. I mean, I had the Mauser that I liked and wanted, but I could have got a perfectly functional, very nice rifle, a Model 700 Remington in the same caliber for 1/3 the cost. So I kicked myself a little bit. But in the early days of this cartridge, for me, I shot a lot of this bullet right here. This is a cast bullet from a Lyman mold number 3589. 35809 it became, and then 358009 later on. It's a 280 grain round nose cast bullet. And it was just absolute dandy in the Whelen. It shot so good. I shot this relatively low velocity, probably 16 or 1700 feet per second. And it worked so good. Harvested a number of deer with this. I never got anything bigger. I built this as a bigger caliber for bigger game, and I never had a chance to really use it. I was supposed to go on an elk hunt in 91, and I never did make it. This is a bullet that I used for a lot of deer in this cartridge. I used this bullet in the 358 as well, and absolutely loved it. which is the reason I tried it in the Whelen. This is a pre-XTP, what is the new one? FTX. This is a 200 grain soft point from Hornady. And I loaded this up with 2520 powder at just under 2,900 feet per second. And it was just a lightning rod on whitetails. The bullet would come apart, but I had through and through penetration with at least pieces of the bullet. I rarely ever recovered anything of the bullet. And like I said, the deer were just devastated. Down they went. That's a 200 grain Hornady. And later on, I graduated up to 225 grains, and I discovered the AccuBond, Nosler AccuBond bullet. And that's my preferred bullet for this cartridge now. And that's what I'm going to do in upcoming videos. We're going to load some of these and work up a load, sight it in. The rifle has a new scope on it last year, and I don't believe I ever sighted it in. So that's the start of this little mini series here. I got 40 cases out, 43 I think out. And the other day I annealed these, cleaned them, cleaned the primer pockets. These are Winchester cases made from 06 brass. Now we had problems with this in the 6506, but I've used this for a long time in this gun and I've never had an issue. So, you know, we're going to assume we're not going to have any more issues and just move on and carry on with using it. If we do, we'll address it then, but it's never been a problem thus far. So I don't want to talk about too much more and jinx ourselves, but Winchester cases. So I'm just going to go through here and continue. And I wanted to introduce the cartridge to you, talk a little bit about it, and tell you where we're going. I can show you the rifle in the next video if that's something that you want to see. Otherwise, you'll see it on the range as I get cartridges loaded and we get out there. So there's about 13 minutes of talking about this. There's my brass all nicely annealed and cleaned. Just got to be gone through and sized and loaded. I can't show you everything on YouTube because they don't allow us to, but I'll show you what I can. We'll touch on some of the loading parts, and we'll get out to the range. So there we go. God bless everybody. Hope this one interests you. It's a favorite of mine. CW out.